Listen closely. Somewhere between a crackling torch and a prayer said through clenched teeth, a continent tried to forget itself, and failed. The year is 1562. Under the hard light of Yucatan, flames climb into the noon sky like ladders for angels who never arrive. A bishop named Diego de Landa believes he is rescuing souls. He is, instead, setting fire to 1,000 conversations with the stars. They call them codices, but that word is too small. These are bark paper observatories, folded constellations, atlases of consciousness. Imagine a book that does not merely count days, but invites you to inhabit them. Now imagine that book hissing into cinders while a choir of cicadas, indifferent, eternal, keeps time. History remembers Alexandria, the library that vanished into smoke. Mani, that small Maya town, is another Alexandria with a tighter throat. We like to think that wisdom dies loudly, with the ceremony of endings. The truth is it often burns quietly, watched by soldiers who cannot read what they destroy, and scribes who are not allowed to mourn. Yet even as pages curl black and drift upward, something refuses to go. Not everything a flame touches disappears. Later, people will say almost nothing survived. But across the square, in the shadow of a ceiba tree, a bent old man runs one palm over a strip of painted glyphs he has tucked beneath his tunic. His name is not recorded. That, too, is a kind of smoke. He does not think I will save a civilization. He thinks only, not today. Not all of it. He holds the strip to his chest and listens for a heartbeat that is not his own. The bishop cannot hear that heartbeat. He is armed with certainty, the heaviest weapon in any conquest. In his mind, time is a road that begins in Genesis and mortars toward judgment. Books that circle back on themselves, calendars that spiral, rituals that whisper to eclipses. These he collapses under one word: superstition. He carries a torch the way a surgeon carries a scalpel, convinced that cutting away is a cure. But time does not accept surgery. It regenerates. The Maya learned this long before iron struck bark. They never merely measured the hours, the way you pour sand into a glass and flip it in despair. They learned to wear time like a garment. Put on a day, and you are shaped by it. Put on a cycle, and it will teach you the gate with which to walk through it. The Spaniards arrive with clocks. The people here already have a pulse. When the last pile of folded paper collapses into embers, the square goes strangely quiet. It is the silence of the moment after lightning, when the air remembers it can kill. Ash floats down onto the steps of the temples that have watched thousands of sunrises and will watch thousands more. A boy wipes soot from his cheeks and writes a date into dust with his finger. The wind erases it. The boy smiles. He knows the date is not in the dust. It is in him. You could say that a civilization survives only in museums, glass and labels and climate control. The Maya would disagree. They trained living libraries, priests who breathed in cadence with Venus, midwives who read the moon like scripture, farmers whose furrows were hymns to the turning year. When bark becomes ash, lungs become pages, tongues become ink. Memory is a temple without doors to break. I want to tell you about a night a decade after the burning, when the last keepers of the days gathered beneath a waxing moon. They were tired in the way mountains are tired, carved, patient, inevitable. The eldest, his face creased with so many calendars that his wrinkles could be mistaken for glyphs, spoke without raising his voice. "They can burn paper," he said, "but not breath. They can take the count from our hands, not from our blood." He did not mean this as metaphor. They had long ago learned that numbers are not only quantities but qualities, 13 as a ladder of heavens, 20 as a map of the human, 260 as the gestation of a soul. But that lesson belongs to a later chapter. For now, imagine the elders turning their bodies into archives, their sleep into study, their children into vaults. They did not preserve texts. They preserved ways of paying attention. And paying attention, it turns out, is the rarest currency in any age. A soldier, let us give him a name, Miguel, because men without names do the most damage, asks a young priest the question every conqueror eventually asks: "How did you know an eclipse would come?" The priest answers in the language of his mother, and then, politely, in the language of the soldier, "We didn't predict it, we remembered it." Miguel laughs, a little too loudly. He thinks the priest means a date written in a book. The priest means a rhythm written in the bones. Here is the most frightening thing about burning libraries. It convinces the burners that the past is gone and the future is theirs. The ashes say otherwise. Ash moves. It settles into cracks, into hair, into the folds of robes and the grooves of steps. Every footfall raises it again into the air, where someone else breathes it. To inhale ashes is to admit that nothing, once made sacred by attention, can be unmade. Destruction, too, has afterlives. If this sounds like myth, good. Myths are instructions written in the only ink that does not fade, astonishment. And if this sounds like history, better. History is a myth with dates, and our dates today are iron and fire. 1562. A bishop orders, a square obeys, a people recalibrates. The world does not end, it learns a new habit of silence. Let us return to the old man beneath the kiba. At dusk he unwraps the rescued strip. The images are not words but doors, a serpent whose shadow descends a staircase twice a year, a hand with 20 fingers because the earth has fingers you cannot see, a dot and a bar, a dot and a bar, arithmetic you can touch. He traces each figure and whispers not their names but their tempos. The paper is frail. The rhythm is not. He closes his eyes. The night opens its 1,000. In the morning, Spanish boots will stamp across the plaza. In the evening, someone will sing a song that never learned to be afraid. Between the two, a day will pass that refuses to be a straight line. You are listening to that day now, centuries later, because time has a way of bending around voices that refuse to shut up. What burned? Ink, bark, pride. What did not? Pattern, breath, the stubborn conviction that a human life can sync with something larger than history and call it kin. The bishop will write a report, the elders will recite a memory, the report will find a shelf, the memory will find a body. Only one of these will survive flood, mildew, moth, neglect. You know which, and you, who have followed this ember across the dark to the place where it still glows. Why are you here? Maybe because the clocks you inherited make a sound you no longer trust. Maybe because some part of you has always suspected that too late and too soon are insults we hurl at a universe that is never wrong. Maybe because you are ready to exchange being on time for being in time. This first chapter ends where all true beginnings do. At the edge of firelight, where a hand reaches for a page and finds a pulse. The codices are ash. The codices are alive. Both are true. What remains to be learned is not how to keep time, but how to let time keep you. Shall we continue? To step from smoke into circle, from schedule into ceremony, from a history of endings into a practice of beginnings? If you stand long enough among the ruins, the stones begin to speak. They do not shout, they hum, a low resonance carried through centuries. It is the memory of those who refused to let knowledge die with paper. The Maya understood something we are only now beginning to rediscover. A book can burn, but a body can remember. Flesh itself is a codex when trained to hold rhythm, when taught to breathe with the cosmos. After the flames of Mani, elders gathered in secret. They no longer relied on libraries of bark and ink. They became the libraries themselves. Each word they whispered to apprentices was not only language but transfer, like passing fire from one torch to the next. The night air of Yucatan, thick with resin smoke and insect song, became their lecture hall. When the Spanish soldiers slept, under the illusion that their mission was complete, the true curriculum of survival continued under starlight. What survived was not a list of dates or rituals, but a way of inhabiting time. To the West, time was a ledger to be balanced, an invisible tax measured in bells and deadlines. To the Maya, time was breath. Inhale, exhale, dawn, dusk. Every pulse in the vein mirrored the turning of Venus. Every cycle of sleep was a rehearsal for the greater cycles of rebirth. When words failed, bodies carried the code. Imagine a priestess walking barefoot along the limestone steps of a forgotten temple. Each step is intentional, each pause calculated. She is not merely climbing, she is reciting an equation with her muscles. To her, the sequence of movement is as precise as any written glyph. Her student follows, trembling at first, then steadier. They are writing the Codex in their very bones. Years later, that student will teach another and another until the body itself has become the archive of an unbroken tradition. Oral traditions across the world echo this method. In Greece, epic poems lived centuries in the breath of bards before ink dared to contain them. In India, entire libraries of sacred verses traveled from tongue to tongue with such precision that a misplaced syllable was considered a wound in the cosmos. Among the Tibetans, mantras are not stored. They are vibrated into being, vibrating the chanter as much as the air. The Maya stood in that same lineage of guardians. When the page dies, the pulse remains. The Spaniards never understood. They could confiscate codices, smash altars, outlaw ceremonies, but they could not outlaw breath. Breath is too small to confiscate, too ordinary to suspect. Yet in the breath lay the secret rhythm of the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar. To exhale on the 13th beat, to pause on the 20th, was to step into the living cycle of the cosmos. You did not need parchment. You needed lungs. One story, passed like a seed through generations, tells of a young boy taken captive by conquistadors. He was forbidden to speak his language, forbidden to recite his prayers. But he was clever. At night he lay still, his breathing patterned in secret. Inhale for the dawn, exhale for the dusk, hold for the eclipse. He taught his younger sister not with words but with silence, shaped like the calendar itself. The soldiers thought he was sleeping. He was not. He was writing on air. This is the power of memory when rooted in the body. It does not depend on fragile archives. It does not need permission. It requires only discipline, attention, and reverence. And here lies the paradox that terrified the invaders more than any idol. Knowledge that cannot be destroyed is knowledge that cannot be controlled. But what exactly did the elders preserve? Not just astronomy, though they could read the sky with terrifying accuracy. Not just agriculture, though their fields sang with the geometry of stars. What they preserved was intimacy with time itself. They did not stand apart from it, ticking it off like an accountant. They moved inside it like a fish within water. To lose that knowledge was to become alien to existence itself. To keep it alive, even hidden, was to ensure that the world still had a heartbeat. Centuries later, anthropologists and scholars would comb ruins, digging for scraps, deciphering fragments. They would publish charts and tables, confident they had reconstructed what was lost. But they often missed the living core. The true Codex was never in the glyphs alone. It was in the way a grandmother timed her grinding of maize to match the rhythm of Venus, or the way a healer aligned the patient's breath with the pulse of the moon. You could not archive that in a museum. You had to live it. Tonight, as you listen, consider your own body. Notice the rhythm of your inhale, the heaviness of your exhale. You may think this is mere biology, but what if every cycle of your breath is a page in a book you forgot how to read? What if your pulse is still whispering the same code the Maya once carried in secret, beneath torchlight and silence? Perhaps you are not merely reading their story. You are continuing it. For in every generation there must be carriers, guardians of memory disguised as ordinary people. They may not wear feathers or robes, they may not chant in temples, but in their quiet acts, pausing to look at the sky, planting with the moon, listening to the silence between seconds, they echo the codices that never burned. And so the question rises for you. Are you only a reader of history, or are you willing to become a page of it, to let your body once again be a library of sacred rhythm? The story moves forward, but not in a straight line. Next, we enter the heart of the Great Divergence, when one world saw time as a line to be raced, and another as a circle to be danced. Picture a horizon at dawn. To the Spaniards who marched across the land, that line of light was merely another day, another step in the march of history, a point on an endless line pushing forward. But to the Maya, dawn was not new. It was a return, a rejoining of something ancient, a reminder that everything which has been will come again. The sun doesn't rise, it circles. The sky doesn't age, it turns. Here lies the great fracture between two visions of reality. The conquerors brought clocks and calendars, instruments of linear obsession. Every tick of the clock was a nail in the coffin of the present moment, each deadline a tiny death. For them, time was a river flowing relentlessly toward its final ocean. Death. For the Maya, time was not a river, but a lake. Enter at any point, and the whole reflects around you. Past, present, and future were ripples on the same surface. Once, a Spanish captain named Miguel Lopez interrogated a young daykeeper. "How can you predict the eclipse?" he demanded, suspicion etched into his voice. The boy smiled gently, as if speaking to a restless child. "We do not predict," he replied. "We remember." The captain frowned, baffled. "Remember? How can you remember what has not yet happened?" The answer was simple, but terrifying to a linear mind. Because tomorrow is not far away. It is folded inside yesterday. Think of a serpent coiling upon itself. To the linear thinker, the snake is a line, head, body, tail. To the Maya, the snake eats its tail. The head is always touching the end, and the end is always the beginning. Thus, the eclipse tomorrow has already happened before, and it will happen again. You do not need to calculate what is inevitable in rhythm. You only need to remember the cycle. This vision is not unique to the Maya. The Stoics of Greece spoke of the eternal return. The sages of India described kalpas, vast cycles of creation and destruction. Buddhism teaches samsara, the wheel of rebirth. Even modern science whispers of circular time, in relativity, where gravity bends the straight line of hours into loops, and in quantum theory, where the future echoes backward. Across cultures, the circle reappears like an insistent truth, even as empires cling to their lines. The tragedy of conquest was not only the burning of books or the fall of temples, it was the imposition of a disease, the belief that time is scarce. If time moves only forward, every moment that passes is lost forever. Anxiety becomes inevitable, for you are always running out of what can never return. This is the hidden plague the Spaniards carried. Not smallpox alone, but the virus of urgency. And so a civilization that danced inside the eternal circle was suddenly forced into the march of the linear. Bells replaced birdsong. Hours replaced cycles. Too late and too early became shackles no prayer could break. The loss was not only cultural, it was spiritual, biological, cosmic. Imagine asking a tree to grow in straight lines, never branching, never curving. It will die. So too does the human spirit when forced into linearity. Yet the circle has not vanished. It hides in plain sight. The seasons still turn. The moon still waxes and wanes. Your breath still enters and leaves in rhythm. Even the heart in your chest remembers the circle, contracting and expanding like a miniature cosmos. We carry the circle within us, though we pretend to march upon a line. Now pause. Close your eyes. Recall a memory so vivid it feels present. Has it not returned to life, here and now? That is the circle speaking. Or think of a dream so intense it shapes your waking choices. Has the future not already touched the present? That too is the circle whispering. The Maya daykeepers would have said, "You do not live in time. You are time. Your existence is not a sequence of pages being torn from a calendar, but a mandala forever redrawn." Forget this, and life becomes a race against the clock. Remember it, and life becomes a dance with eternity. But how does one relearn the steps to that dance? The answer lies in numbers. Numbers alive, numbers breathing, numbers that whisper truths beyond arithmetic. They are not symbols of quantity, but beings of quality, guardians of rhythm. 3 numbers above all, 13, 20, and 260. And it is here that the circle begins to reveal its secret mathematics. Numbers, to the Spaniards, were servants, tools for counting gold, measuring land, calculating debts. But to the Maya, numbers were not servants. They were sovereigns. Each one carried a pulse, a resonance, a doorway into the cosmic rhythm. To misunderstand them as mere arithmetic was to mistake thunder for noise, or sunlight for heat alone. The elders taught that numbers breathe. The number 13 was not simply 12 plus 1. It was the ladder of heavens, 13 levels of awareness that a soul must climb on its journey toward divine completion. Each step corresponded to a state of consciousness, from survival to vision to wisdom, until the 13th rung dissolved the boundary between human and God. When a priest ascended a temple's staircase, he was not performing ritualized exercise. He was literally enacting the cosmos, step by sacred step. Then there was 20. Look at your own body. 10 fingers, 10 toes, 20 extremities anchoring you in the physical realm. But the Maya did not stop there. To them, the human was a receiver, a living antenna with 20 ports of contact with the universe. 20 was completeness, flesh and spirit aligned. And it was no coincidence that the sacred month carried 20 days, each one a personality, a teacher. One day whispered of loyalty, another of courage, another of silence. Imagine waking each morning not only to weather, but to a distinct teaching carried by the fabric of the day itself. And then came 260, the heartbeat of creation, the Tzolkin. 13 heavens weaving through 20 sacred days, creating 260 unique combinations. This cycle was not a calendar as we think of it, ticking toward deadlines. It was a map of possible consciousness, a guidebook of soul states. To live through 260 days was to be initiated into every facet of human potential. One night, under a sky heavy with stars, a teacher posed a question to his young apprentice. Why is the Tzolkin 260 days long? The apprentice recited the official answer, because it harmonizes celestial cycles, because it tracks Venus and the sun. The teacher smiled, as teachers do when waiting for something deeper. Yes, but what does your heart tell you? The apprentice closed his eyes. He listened not with ears, but with the blood in his veins. And suddenly he knew. 260 is the number of days it takes for a human child to gestate in the womb. The calendar was not an invention. It was a mirror of life itself. Every soul that enters this world has already traveled the full circle of 260, already absorbed the wisdom of each day, before its first cry. What does this mean for us now? That birth is not beginning, but remembering. That every child arrives already initiated, already wise, already carrying the codes of the cosmos in their tiny fists. We do not learn, we forget. We do not seek, we reawaken. The Spanish conquerors could not see this. For them, numbers were cold. For the Maya, numbers were alive. They whispered through the cycles of planets, echoed in the orbits of Venus, throbbed in the tides of blood and ocean. Everywhere you looked, 13, 20, 260 appeared like signatures scrawled across creation. The universe itself was telling its story in mathematics, and the Maya had learned to listen. Pause here. Consider your own heartbeat. Does it not pulse in a rhythm you did not invent? Consider your breath, how it rises and falls, oblivious to the calendar on your wall. Consider the dreams that come unbidden, timed not by alarm clocks, but by mysteries older than empires. These, too, are numbers breathing through you. The tragedy is that we traded this living arithmetic for mechanical timekeeping. We inherited clocks that dissect the day into sterile fragments. We forgot that numbers can teach, heal, initiate. And yet, the numbers have not abandoned us. They continue to hum beneath our distractions, waiting for ears willing to hear. The elders would say, 13 is the path of ascent, 20 is the fullness of embodiment, 260 is the womb of all becoming. Together they weave the fabric of eternity. Together they cure the disease of linear time, reminding us that we are not marching toward oblivion, but circling back into ourselves. But numbers are not the only secret, for beneath them lies a story of our very origin, of gods who failed 3 times before finding the material worthy of humanity. And that material was not clay, nor wood, nor flesh alone. It was maize, the sacred corn, the grain of light, the food that became our bones and our spirit. Shall we open the husk and see what was hidden inside? Before we speak of the sacred maize, we must walk through the failures of the gods. Creation is never a single act. It is a series of attempts, each one carrying lessons etched in the ashes of the last. The Popol Vuh, whispered to those who knew how to listen, tells us the story of humanity's rough drafts. The first men were made of clay. Their bodies were fragile, their limbs collapsed with rain, their faces washed away with tears. They could not endure. Clay men crumbled under the weight of time, teaching us that without inner structure, without a spine of spirit, life dissolves. They are the ancestors of all who lack discipline, who collapse at the first touch of sorrow. The second men were made of wood. They were stronger, flexible, even capable of walking and speaking. But their chests were empty. They had no heart, no blood, no memory of the divine. They functioned like tools, mechanical and hollow. When the gods tested them, they discovered that these beings could not love, could not worship, could not remember gratitude. So they were swept away in a flood. Some remnants survived, transforming into monkeys, swinging forever between earth and sky, imitations of man without the fire of soul. The third men were made of flesh. Red earth and sacred water were shaped into muscle and bone. These beings were powerful, agile, radiant with vitality. But their flaw was subtle and fatal. Arrogance, believing themselves too perfect, They forgot their dependence on the gods. They mistook strength for divinity, and so the gods destroyed them, not with water but with fire and beasts, breaking their pride until they scattered into wandering spirits. 3 failures, each echoing in us still: fragility, emptiness, arrogance. And then, at last, the council of creation turned to the wisdom of the grandmother goddess Mukane. She alone held the secret. Her counsel was simple: make them of maize. Corn was no ordinary plant. It was both earth and sun, a child of soil and sky. Its stalk rooted deep in the darkness, while its tassels reached toward light. It bent in storms but did not break. It fed both body and spirit, carrying memory within its kernels. The gods ground yellow and white maize, mixing it with sacred water until it became dough. From that dough, they shaped human flesh. Our bones were formed from the stalks, our blood from fermented corn water, our very minds from the essence of maize's spirit. Thus were born the true humans, the people of maize. Unlike clay, they endured. Unlike wood, they loved. Unlike flesh, they remembered their origin. To eat maize was not mere sustenance. It was communion, a sacrament. Every tortilla, every tamal, every ear of corn roasted over fire was a prayer, a renewal of covenant. When the Maya lifted food to their lips, they were not feeding hunger alone. They were reminding their bodies what they were made of. Modern science may dismiss this as myth, yet consider: maize was one of the first plants completely shaped by human hands, cultivated until it could no longer exist without us, and we could not exist without it. Our DNA carries markers of this long companionship. In every sense, biological, spiritual, symbolic, humanity in this land was born of maize. And perhaps you too, though far from Yucatan, carry a seed of this truth. For what are you, if not shaped by cycles of earth and sun? What are your thoughts, if not kernels planted by those who came before you? You eat bread, rice, or corn, and in each grain is a lesson: to grow toward light, to remain rooted in earth, to transform suffering into nourishment. The Spaniards saw cornfields and thought only of food. The Maya saw sanctuaries. They knew that maize was not just crop, but code. That to understand the human was to understand the corn's journey, from seed in darkness to stalk in light to grain that feeds another. Birth, life, death, rebirth, all encoded in the husk of a single ear. And there was more. The Popol Vuh hinted at a gift beyond survival. The people of maize had been given a faculty none of the previous creations possessed: the ability to see through time, to remember the past, inhabit the present, and glimpse the cycles to come. This was their inheritance, the vision of destiny woven into the kernel itself. Do you feel it stirring in you now? That ancestral memory, the quiet certainty that you are more than flesh, more than bone, more than accident, that you are woven from cycles, that you are a living harvest of light and shadow? The gods shaped us of maize, but they did not stop there. They gave us tools to navigate the web of destiny: calendars, patterns, sacred weavings of time itself. For if maize gave us body, the calendars gave us map and compass. And so we arrive at the invisible loom, where the threads of fate are spun not once but forever. Every culture speaks of fate, but the Maya did not imagine destiny as an iron chain. To them, destiny was a loom, and time itself was the thread. Each day, each number, each cycle was a colored strand woven into the fabric of existence. To walk through life was to step across this tapestry, sometimes following the pattern, sometimes tugging against it, but never leaving it. They called it the Great Weaving, the invisible textile stretched across heaven and earth. And to read it required calendars, not one, but many. The Spaniards arrived with a single calendar of 365 days, a blunt instrument, sufficient for planting and taxation, but blind to the subtle rhythms of spirit. The Maya, in contrast, cultivated no fewer than 17 calendars, each one tuned to a different dimension of reality, each one a distinct thread in the cosmic fabric. The most visible was the Hab, the solar year of 365 days, which traced the seasons and the crops. But alongside it pulsed the Tzolk'in, the 260-day sacred cycle mapping human consciousness. When these two calendars interlocked, they formed the calendar round of 52 years, a cycle so complete that no day repeated in precisely the same way until the circle closed. A lifetime could be measured not in years, but in the uniqueness of its place within this wheel. And there were more. The Venus calendar of 584 days, guiding matters of beauty, love, and transformation. The 9 lords of the night, rotating every 9 days, pulling souls through shadows and rebirth. Lunar counts that traced the womb of the Sky Mother. To outsiders, it was confusion. To the Maya, it was harmony. Like hearing 17 instruments play at once and knowing how each contributes to the symphony. There is a story told of a grandmother weaver in a mountain village. As she threaded white cotton through her loom, she explained destiny to her grandson. Each strand has a color, a direction, a purpose. Alone, it is fragile. Together they form a design no thread can see by itself. That is how time works. You cannot see the whole pattern. But you can learn to feel the tension of the threads you hold in your hand. This was the genius of Maya calendars. They did not dictate what must happen, as the Spaniards believed. They revealed the currents beneath the surface, the probabilities, the qualities of a moment, the tendencies of energy. To consult the calendar was not fortune-telling. It was navigation. A warrior checked it before battle, not to know victory or defeat, but to understand what forces of cosmos would flow with him or against him. A mother consulted it before naming her child, not to limit the child's future, but to align the child with the day's medicine. Even more astonishing, the calendars worked not only forward, but backward. By studying them, the daykeepers saw why certain events had unfolded in the past, what energies had been alive when a king rose or fell, when a people prospered or suffered. Conquest itself, they whispered, had not been random. The Spaniards had arrived at the hinge of a great cycle, a moment when old patterns dissolved and new ones surged, when turbulence made even stone cities vulnerable. The invaders thought they chose their timing. In truth, they were carried by currents they could not see. And now, centuries later, we too stand in such a moment. Old structures creak and crumble. New possibilities, once unthinkable, bloom in chaos. We are again at the place in the loom where threads shift, colors bleed, and the pattern changes. Do you feel it? The acceleration of events, the dissolving of old certainties, the restless stirring of something vast beneath ordinary life? The Maya would say, you are not lost. You are in transition. You are standing where the threads cross. The pattern has not vanished. It is reweaving itself. But to reweave consciously, you must learn to hear the voices not of humans alone, but of stars. For the sky is not silent decoration. It is the living scripture of the cosmos, the codex that no fire could burn. And so our journey rises from loom to sky to read the messages written in starlight itself. Raise your eyes to the night sky. To the untrained, the stars are scattered dust. To the Maya, they were letters in a cosmic book, blinking messages in a language older than words. Every dawn, every eclipse, every wandering of a planet was a verse in that endless scripture. Among these voices, Venus was the most eloquent, not merely a planet, but a goddess, a heartbeat in the heavens. The Dresden Codex, one of the few sacred books that escaped the flames, records her rhythms with exquisite precision. To the Spaniards, it looked like primitive astronomy. To the Maya, it was midwifery on a cosmic scale. Venus, appearing as morning star, announced beginnings, births, journeys, new alliances. As evening star, she presided over completions, harvests, farewells, transformations, and every 8 years her cycle traced a perfect 5-petaled flower in the sky, a celestial rose whispering the geometry of creation. The moon, too, sang her hymns. Her phases were not just markers of time, but stages of alchemy. New moon, the vessel emptied, awaiting infusion, waxing, the germination of intentions. Full moon, the flowering of potential. Waning, the distillation of wisdom. Each eclipse was not disruption, but surgery, a removal of what no longer served, making room for renewal. The Spanish soldiers looked up in terror during an eclipse, fearing the world's end. The Maya stood in preparation, fasting, chanting, awaiting visions. For them, shadow was not annihilation, but initiation. And then there was the sun, Kukulkán's radiant heart. Every solstice, every equinox, it cast shadows along temple stairs that slithered like the body of a serpent. Light itself became storyteller. Even stone pyramids participated in the dialogue of cosmos, turning architecture into scripture. One priest once told his apprentice, "The stars are not above you. They are inside you, reflected in your blood. The same iron that burns in their cores flows through your veins. To look at the sky is to look at your own body in its larger form." Centuries later, science would confirm, we are indeed stardust. The Maya had no telescopes, yet they already knew. Why did they watch so carefully? Not for curiosity alone. They believed the stars could heal. Each planet carried medicine, each constellation a teaching. Mars lent courage, Jupiter bestowed wisdom, Saturn demanded discipline. To align one's life with these celestial physicians was to restore harmony between soul and cosmos. Where the Spaniards brought doctors who bled the body with steel, the Maya prescribed starlight, rhythm, and breath. Pause here. Think of the last time you looked at the stars. Not glanced, but really looked. Did you feel a stirring, an ache you could not name? That ache is memory. The part of you that remembers once being guided not by clocks, but by constellations. The longing to return to that intimacy is not nostalgia. It is instruction. The Maya believed that when humanity strayed too far from the sky, sickness would spread, not only in bodies but in societies. People who forget the stars become blind to cycles, blind to harmony, blind to their own place in the cosmos. And yet, there is hope. For even if we look away, the stars continue to whisper. They have never ceased their song. You who listen now are not here by accident. The same forces that guided eclipses and solstices have guided you to these words. The question is not whether the stars still speak, but whether you are willing to remember their language. And if the heavens can heal, then time itself can heal. For the true medicine the Maya carried was not only in plants or stones, but in the very hours and days, carefully applied like herbs, like chants, like prayers. It is time to enter the chamber where the greatest healer waits, the chamber of sacred time. The Spaniards brought surgeons with iron tools and physicians with leeches and prayers. They treated the body as a battlefield to be purged of invaders. But the Maya healers saw differently. Sickness was not an enemy from outside, but a fracture of rhythm. A wound was not merely in flesh, it was in the song of time that body and soul had forgotten how to sing together, and so they prescribed not only plants or minerals, but moments. Time itself was medicine. In the healing temples of Palenque and Copan, a patient might not receive a potion, but a date. A woman mourning her husband was told, "Wait 200 days until the sacred combination of his birth returns, and then you will feel his presence again." Each sunrise she was instructed to whisper a prayer, each sunset to light a flame. She did this not to cling to the past, but to weave her grief into rhythm. When the destined day arrived, the veil thinned. She wept, not with despair but release. Time had carried her through a ritual more powerful than any herb. This practice the elders called temporal medicine. Every day carried a frequency, every cycle a cure. Days of Imix dissolved fear. Days of Ox transmuted anger into loyalty. Days of Ahau revealed purpose where confusion reigned. The healer's role was to diagnose not only the illness, but the misalignment with time. To prescribe the correct day was to return the patient to harmony with cosmos. Think of this carefully. We still live under the tyranny of linear time, a disease of urgency that colonized not only lands but hearts. We say, "I don't have time." We fear being late, fear being old, fear running out of hours as if they were coins slipping through our hands. Anxiety itself is the symptom of living as though time were scarce. The Maya would call this the plague of the straight line. And their cure? To sit within the circle again. Patients were led into a ring of stones, each stone marking a day of the sacred calendar. They breathed in rhythm. 13 deep breaths, pause, 20 light breaths, pause, again and again, until the 260-day cycle pulsed through their lungs. At first, the linear mind panicked. Too slow, too pointless, too strange. But then something shifted. They discovered that when you enter the rhythm, the present moment expands. Past and future dissolve. You are no longer chased by time, you are held by it. Reports from these healings tell of spontaneous transformations. Fevers cooling, grief softening, visions blooming. A warrior limped in with wounds that would not close. He left steady, his scars glowing like silver lines of memory. A child haunted by night terrors slept peacefully after breathing with the rhythm of the stars. None of this was magic. It was medicine, applying the right quality of time in the right dose. Even deeper, some illnesses required not days but cycles. Wounds from past lives could only be healed when certain planetary alignments returned. Ancestral curses demanded ceremonies extending across generations. In this, the Maya saw what modern therapy barely begins to grasp. Healing is not bound to a single lifetime. Time itself holds the cure if we dare to wait for the right moment. And what of us now? Have we not all fallen sick with the fever of ours? Our lives are measured in deadlines, productivity charts, alarms, notifications. We are infected with the obsession of not enough time. Yet the cure is still here. To step out of the line and into the circle. To breathe not by the tick of the clock, but by the pulse of cosmos. The elders warned that a day would come when the plague of linear time would consume entire civilizations. People would feel hollow, hurried, trapped in scarcity. They would forget how to rest in the eternal present. And in that age, the temples themselves would awaken, vibrating with ancient frequencies, offering back the medicine encoded in stone. But before we reach the temples, we must first hear the sound that lives at the core of all things, the vibration of the universe itself. For when you understand that the cosmos is music, you understand why healing was never about conquest, but resonance. Close your eyes and listen. Beneath the chatter of thoughts, beneath the noise of streets and machines, there is a hum. A frequency so constant we have forgotten it is there. The Maya never forgot. For them, the universe was not silent. It was a vast instrument, and every star, every temple, Every human heart was a string on its cosmic harp. Their pyramids were not monuments to power, but resonators, tuned with the precision of sacred engineers. At Chichen Itza, a single clap before Kukulkán's staircase returns, not as echo, but as birdsong, the call of the Quetzal, sacred to the feathered serpent. This was no accident. Stone and angle were chosen to summon voices hidden in air, to remind those present that architecture could sing. The temple itself was a choir, its notes opening gateways in consciousness. In Palenque, within the Temple of the Inscriptions, whispers carried for impossible distances. Priests discovered that if they stood in exact places, their heartbeats began to sync with the golden ratio, the proportion of harmony woven through shells, flowers, galaxies. Their pulses became music, amplified by chambers of stone, until the whole structure throbbed with a rhythm not of one body, but of cosmos itself. To stand there was to feel your veins tuned like strings. Every frequency had its medicine. Days of immix vibrated at one pitch, days of ik at another. Priests mapped them like a scale, tuning ceremonies to the needs of their people. Some tones brought rain, others courage, others healing. With conch shells, flutes, and drums, they amplified what the body already carried. With their voices, they braided chant into geometry. With temples, they sculpted resonance itself. Modern science now whispers what the ancients declared openly. Everything vibrates. The earth resonates at 783 hertz, the Schumann resonance, the very heartbeat of the planet. The moon sings higher, pulling tides and moods. Venus hums a tender frequency of love, while Mars roars a rhythm of war. The Maya had no machines to measure this, yet they built lives around the recognition that sound is not ornament. It is the skeleton of reality. And they discovered something even more astonishing. The human body is an instrument capable of tuning to all of it. Bones vibrate with the earth, blood with the moon, nerves with the stars. When aligned, you do not merely hear the cosmos, you become its song. Think of the last time a piece of music made you weep, or gave you strength when you had none. That was not entertainment. That was medicine. The Maya priests used this power with precision. They gathered initiates in circles, each chanting a frequency of a different planet. Together they formed chords of reality, summoning rain, mending bodies, opening doors to visions. They were conductors of a symphony the universe had been playing since before time began. What if illness is nothing more than dissonance? What if despair is a note out of tune? What if healing is not conquest but harmony restored? This was their belief, their practice, their science. Align the tone, and the world aligns with you. Even the stones remembered. Each temple was carved not only to resonate in its own age, but to store frequencies like a record. When struck by chant or drum, the walls released ancient tones again, carrying forward the voices of priests long turned to dust. The Spaniards thought they destroyed the ceremonies. They did not realize the music had been pressed into limestone, waiting patiently for centuries to be heard again. And now, in our own era, visitors report strange sensations among the ruins, chills, visions, bursts of clarity. Perhaps the temples are waking. Perhaps the songs carved in stone are rising once more, preparing us for the cycle foretold long ago. But what cycle? What prophecy has been so misunderstood, so sensationalized that many feared it as the end of the world? To understand, we must step into the most famous of Maya mysteries, the prophecy of 2012. Not an apocalypse, but a birth. The year was whispered across continents, 2012. Some feared it, others mocked it, and many dismissed it as superstition. Yet for the Maya, That date was never the end. It was a threshold, the close of one gestation and the trembling beginning of another. For over 1,000 years, priests had tracked the long count calendar, a span of 5,925 years, each day a bead on the thread of eternity. December 21st, 2012, marked the end of that cycle. The Spaniards and their heirs, trapped in the obsession with endings, saw only doom. But the Maya saw birth. As a mother groans with contractions before her child emerges, so too the earth shuddered with storms, earthquakes, and upheavals, not as punishment, but as labor pains. The alignment that occurred then was extraordinary. The winter solstice sun positioned itself in the dark rift of the Milky Way, what the Maya called the mouth of the cosmic jaguar. To them, this was not an astronomical curiosity. It was the universe itself preparing to deliver a new humanity. Just as Venus traces a 5-petaled rose in the sky every 8 years, the galaxy had reached its own moment of flowering, and we were the seed. Look around at the decades that followed. Systems crumbled. Political, economic, spiritual. Old certainties dissolved, communication leapt into lightning speed, and millions began hungering not for wealth, but for meaning. This, the Maya foretold, a time when the human soul, long lulled to sleep by linear time, would begin to stir. Strange awakenings, visions, synchronicities, dreams that feel more real than waking life, were not accidents but symptoms of birth. But birth is never gentle. Just as a butterfly must struggle to escape its cocoon, humanity too would thrash in confusion, resisting the very freedom being offered. Forces of fear would rise, promoting division and control, desperate to keep the old order intact. And yet, the Maya taught, resistance itself is part of the prophecy. Without pressure, the new wings would never strengthen enough to fly. They foresaw 3 decades of transformation, a 30-year corridor in which humanity would learn to stand as a newborn species of consciousness. The first would awaken like midwives, guiding others, carrying memory in their blood. Communities would form not around domination, but resonance. And by the time the cycle of 2042 arrives, the Earth would be ready to host not merely humans, but guardians, beings aware of their galactic role, woven into the great chorus of existence. This was the true prophecy of 2012, not destruction, but deliverance, not the end, but the opening of a greater cycle. We were never meant to vanish. We were meant to remember, and you, listening now, are not a bystander. If these words stir you, it is because you carry that memory. The Maya believed souls would return, reborn exactly when needed. Perhaps you are one of them, called to serve as bridge between the wisdom of the ancients and the world now trembling into light. But prophecy alone is not enough. To walk this path, one must understand the symbols that guarded the deepest truths of transformation, the teachers carved in stone and dream, the jaguar that prowls between worlds, and the serpent that sheds its skin to fly. In the temples of stone, the Spaniards saw carvings of beasts, ferocious jaguars, winding serpents with feathered wings. To them, it was primitive idol worship. To the Maya, it was scripture written in symbols, the sacred language of transformation. The jaguar was not just an animal. It was the spiritual warrior who could walk between worlds. In the jungle, the jaguar moves silently through both water and land, hunting in darkness with eyes that pierce the night. Likewise, the jaguar initiate was one who learned to travel between the realms of waking, dream, and spirit. To wear the jaguar's skin was to declare, "I walk in shadow but fear no night, for I carry the sun within." Jaguar priests trained in caves, fasting 13 days in pitch black, facing every demon of fear, shame, and despair. If they emerged, they did so transformed, their perception sharpened, their will unbreakable. They could shift states of consciousness instantly, heal with a touch, call visions at will, alter reality with focused intent. Speed and stillness both were their weapons. Just as the jaguar explodes from silence to strike, so too could the initiate leap from despair into clarity in a heartbeat. But no jaguar could be whole without the wisdom of the serpent. The snake taught the other art, slow transformation, the rebirth of shedding. While the jaguar revealed sudden power, the serpent revealed patient renewal. The feathered serpent, Kukulkán, Quetzalcoatl to the north, was the supreme symbol, earthbound serpent joined with skybound bird, matter and spirit entwined, mortality ascending. Initiates of the serpent underwent the long cycle, 260 days, one full tzolk'in. In that time they shed old selves layer by layer, the reactive emotions, the limiting thoughts, the memories of pain, the illusions of separation. At the end, they emerged reborn, radiant, carrying within their very being the spiral of eternity. To become both jaguar and serpent was to master the balance, transformation sudden and transformation slow, one like lightning, the other like dawn. Together they formed the blueprint not only for spiritual initiates, but for humanity's own awakening. The Maya prophesied that one day entire civilizations would undergo these twin transformations, some awakening in flashes, others in long spirals of renewal. This age, they said, would come when the cycle of time itself turned toward rebirth. And what of you, listener? Perhaps your life has already tasted both: sudden revelations, impossible synchronicities, jaguar leaps, long seasons of shedding, of pain transmuted slowly into wisdom, serpent growth. These are not random. They are the ancient processes working through you, signs that you are living the prophecy carved in stone. But the Maya did not stop with symbols. They built entire cities as instruments to accelerate these transformations. Temples were more than sacred spaces. They were machines of consciousness, resonators that amplified the jaguar's leap and the serpent's rebirth. To step inside them was to enter the circuitry of cosmos itself. And so we turn now to the temples, the stone libraries of time, waiting centuries for those who could hear them sing again. Every stone was placed with intention. To the untrained eye, a temple was a monument of grandeur. To the initiated, it was a living engine humming with frequencies of the cosmos. The Maya did not build to honor gods in the abstract. They built to weave consciousness itself into stone. Each temple was a resonator, a transmitter, a library. At Chichen Itza, the pyramid of Kukulkán rises with 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. But those steps were more than numbers. They were tones in a cosmic scale. During the equinox, shadows descend the staircase in the form of a serpent of light, marrying heaven and earth in a moving sculpture of time. To ascend consciously was to climb not stone, but frequencies. Every pause, every breath was a key unlocking new states of perception. At the summit, the initiate stood not only above the jungle canopy, but at the intersection of worlds. In Palenque, the Temple of the Inscriptions was tuned to another purpose. Its chambers were designed so that whispers carried through stone, resonating in ways that amplified the rhythm of the human heart. Priests discovered that if one stood in the exact center of the chamber, their heartbeat synced with the golden ratio, the same divine proportion found in shells, galaxies, and flowers. The body became a metronome of the cosmos, vibrating with the music of creation. And the network extended beyond individual sites. Palenque, Tikal, Copan, Uxmal, Each city was a node in a vast web, connected by invisible lines of force the Spaniards never detected. Rituals in one temple echoed in another, even across mountains and forests. It was, in truth, a spiritual internet long before our modern one. A web of resonance carrying not data, but consciousness. More astonishing still, the temples were archives of memory. The Maya had discovered how to inscribe consciousness itself into crystal and limestone. Great masters, before departing this life, would spend months in ceremony, transferring their wisdom into the very walls of their temples, not as ghosts bound in sorrow, but as living libraries encoded in frequency. Anyone attuned could step into those chambers and receive visions, knowledge, even dialogue with the minds of the ancients. This is why the temples never truly died. Though abandoned, they breathe. Though weathered, they whisper. Visitors today speak of chills, of strange dreams after walking their steps, of feeling watched not by eyes but by presence. These are not fantasies. They are the first pulses of the network reawakening, just as the Maya foretold. And why now? Because we stand in the corridor of transformation. The temples, long dormant, are stirring to life to aid humanity's birth into a higher consciousness. They are ready. The question is, are we? The answer lies in the final secret the Maya preserved. Beyond calendars, beyond temples, beyond prophecy itself, they guarded a truth so subversive the conquistadors tried to burn it out of existence. That time itself is not a prison, but our essence.